Hi, everyone. My name is Mandy Paradise. I'm the OSPI Program Supervisor for Open Doors. Today's video has two parts. The first part is 3 minutes on an update of the rule revision status. And the second part will walk through the results from the face-to-face survey. Now, COVID-19 and the overall pandemic spurred Open Doors to put in place emergency rules for the face-to-face attendance requirements. With the pandemic response shifting from reaction into planning ahead, OSPI is in process of revising the Open Doors attendance rules. So in October 2021, we launched a survey to gather information from you and your colleagues to help inform these revisions. In terms of process, we're moving from the exploration stage into the installation stage. Installation means we're taking what we learned from the survey to guide the permanent rule revisions for attendance. While some ongoing feedback collection will occur, OSPI has the bulk of the information needed to move ahead. So this timeline may look familiar. Now, after the survey closed in the fall, we started doing data analysis and sharing those results with the steering committee and with the college program partners group. Now that we're in January, OSPI is starting to actually draft the WAC revisions for the attendance requirements, which is also referred to as the face-to-face requirements. Moving into the spring, we plan to have our revisions fully drafted and vetted by the Open Door Steering Committee, and then to proceed with our formal permanent rules process. Now let's move into the survey results. The rest of this video will be featuring Dr. Emily Scott, my colleague at OSPI. She'll be presenting an analysis of the results, and this video will go on for about 10 minutes. We had a total of 116 responses that spanned all levels of the Open Door staffing. And if you're interested, a PDF data package is available. And you can use the link in the video description below to download it. It'll provide you more background on the charts and more data to reference.
We saw that most of our respondents were administrators, case managers, and teachers, and folks with those roles responded in fairly equal numbers. And then when we looked at the types of programs that respondents came from, most were from community colleges and school districts. So we also asked our survey respondents to tell us something about the students that they serve. And most respondents indicated that they served a combination of re-engaged youth who had previously dropped out of school and students who were at risk. Mandy, did you want to say anything about student populations here?
Sure. Thank you. Thanks, Emily. You guys might be a little wondering about what these two things mean, whether at risk or re-engaged. One of the questions we asked on the survey was about, do you perceive your program serving mostly youth who are vulnerable to drop out, which would be at risk to drop out, or are they youth who were that you had to actively re-engage, youth who had already been pushed out of school, youth who had already required additional outreach to go reconnect them back into the building. So those are the two populations, people who have not yet been pushed out or dropped out, or students who have been pushed out and dropped out. And Emily's analysis shows us that a large majority are serving about 50-50. They said we serve about half of both populations. Some said that 14 said that they serve primarily students who are at risk of dropout or push out, and that 39 of the program respondents said that they serve students who, the majority of the students they serve are students that have already been pushed out or experiencing out of school time.
Thanks, Mandy. All right, so now we're going to dive into the survey results. But first, I want to give you just a brief overview of how I analyzed the data. So as we saw on the first slide, our survey respondents had different roles, and they came from different program types like school districts and community colleges. And so we were curious if a survey respondent's role or the program that they came from or the program type that they came from would influence the way they responded to our survey questions. And so to investigate this, I ran statistical models on each of the questions, investigating if role or program type had any kind of influence on how people responded. And so, spoiler alert, there was only one question where a person's role, there were significant differences in how respondents with different roles answered our survey question. So I will go into that when we come to it. But in general, when you look at the results that I present to you, just know that it didn't matter if a person was a teacher or an administrator in the way they responded to the questions, or it didn't matter what program types they came from. They were equally as likely to select a particular answer to a question. And then, so yes, so program type and role generally had no impact. And then I just want to orient you quickly to the structure of the figures I'm going to show. So on the x-axis is going to be the survey responses that a respondent could select. And then on the y-axis is a count of the number of respondents who made that selection. So for example, in this particular hypothetical case, you could interpret this first bar as being 10 people chose response 1. So are there any questions before we move on? And you can just unmute yourself because I, like Mandy, have a little hard time seeing everyone. Okay, I am going to pop right into the results then. So this is the first question, and it was, do you support ongoing digital face-to-face options for the 2021 and 2021 school year? And as you can see, the respondents overwhelmingly selected yes to this question. The next question was, do you prefer a specific duration for extending the digital option? And in response to this question, most people selected a duration of the whole 2021 to 2022 school year for extending that digital option. So this was our exciting question where there were some significant differences, which is why the graph looks so different. So I will walk you through that. But first, what the question was for severely credit deficient students who have left traditional and/or alternative school settings, do you think that a completely virtual open doors program can provide the variety and acuity of services required to re-engage them? So I'm going to walk you through this slide. So first off, the different shadings of blue represent different roles that respondents held. So it was just role that had a significant effect. So if we were just to look at the darkest blue bars, these represent teachers. And so you can see that roughly 9 teachers selected no, 1 teacher selected unsure, and about 20 teachers selected yes. So that's with the purple arrows, that's what it indicates. And so you would just compare those same colors of bars if you were looking at someone in a particular role. All right, so when we dug into how a respondent's role influenced their selection, we found a significant difference between how teachers and administrators responded to this question. So if we just look at the yes category and we compare teachers and administrators, the odds of a teacher responding yes to this question were significantly higher than administrators. And then if we look at the no response, the odds of a teacher selecting no were significantly lower than an administrator. And so we can see that kind of what that means again is, so teachers were more likely to say yes to this statement, where administrators were more likely to say no, that a completely virtual open doors program could provide the variety and acuity of services to students in order to re-engage them.
Emily, I just want to pop in here real quick.
Yeah.
And just again, share our deep regard and appreciation for everyone who took the survey, because as you can see, we're really trying to fully understand. Yes, Allie says the good things that data analysis will reveal, that the helpfulness of having teachers and direct service providers, case managers respond to these questions really helps us to craft a well-informed policy to move ahead. We love working with our administrators, don't get us wrong, but just knowing that the perceptions can vary is very helpful for us. So thank you.
The last thing I want to point out about this graph is that if we were to sum all of the yes responses and sum all of the no responses, overall, 50% of the respondents selected yes, to this question, and 38 respondents selected no. It's a little bit harder to pull that out when we have everyone divided by their different role, but overall, more people were selecting yes. So the next question was, for severely credit deficient students who have left traditional and/or alternative school settings, do you think that a completely virtual Open Doors program can provide the type of services students need to make continual academic progress? And to this question, almost twice as many respondents selected yes. The next question was, for severely credit deficient students who have left traditional and/or alternative school settings, do you think that a completely virtual Open Doors program can sufficiently help youth navigate community services and overcome social emotional barriers? For this question, respondents were fairly evenly split between yes and no. And we did see some suggestion that the odds of a teacher selecting yes, so agreeing that a virtual Open Doors program could sufficiently help youth navigate community services, that they were more likely to select yes than an administrator was. It was a marginally significant result, so not enough that I wanted to pull it out individually, but just knowing that there was this kind of underlying trends, there might be some differences between how teachers and administrators respond to this question. And then for severely credit deficient students who have left traditional and/or alternative school settings, do you think that offering in-person opportunities is a vital programming component? So to this question, respondents overwhelmingly selected yes, that having those in-person opportunities could be really important, an important part of their programs. And then when it comes to face-to-face requirements, do you support permanently updating the rule to be more flexible, perhaps by including synchronous digital options, waivers for specific students, or tiers of need? And again, to this question, respondents overwhelmingly selected yes. So that's kind of sums up our quantitative portion of the analyses that we did. So we also asked survey respondents several free response questions where they could share and elaborate on their experiences. So Mandy, Lori, and I used qualitative data analysis methods to identify some recurring themes in people's responses and track how often those themes appeared. So those are the data that I'm going to show you next. Any questions before I transition to this different segment? Okay, I think I just hear silence. All right, so the question that respondents were responding to was, what can you share with us about the impact of in-person supports for students in your program? So I'm going to tell you how to interpret this figure. So the different themes that we identified that recurred across those roughly 116 responses that people provided are going to be outlined on the x-axis. And then the number of times those themes appeared across responses is on the y-axis. So we only coded it once, a theme once if it appeared in a response. So again, on the y-axis, that's number of total respondents. So the first thing that I want to draw your attention to is that 16% of respondents expressed that virtual programs, or a combination of virtual and in-person programs, were successful at supporting their students. And so an example of what someone wrote, and I've highlighted in bold the key ideas that we pulled out in their different themes on the x-axis. And this person wrote, for many of our students, getting to campus to engage in person is its own barrier. For many of our students, the in-person interactions are so anxiety-inducing that they are not effective ways to communicate at all. Having access to support and resources virtually or via text messages at times that work for their schedules is also very important. Having the option to work with and communicate with students in a way that is most effective for them is what is most beneficial. So the second finding I want to highlight is that 86% of respondents shared that in-person supports were an important part of their program. And then many of respondents also shared, like, more specifically, which aspects of in-person interactions they felt were important for their students. And that's what's described in all those themes came out in that are in the blue box I've highlighted. So for example, 64% of respondents mentioned an increased emotional benefits or forming relationships that occur from in-person interactions. 27% of respondents mentioned something about increased opportunities to support students in their learning. 24% mentioned something about the increased performance on academic tasks or more progress to achieving their learning goals occurred when in-person interactions occurred. 23% mentioned something about the increased access to resources, such as meeting with case managers, receiving food, clothes, mental health, or other social services occurred because of in-person interactions. 22% mentioned something about access to safe and productive workspaces that occurs during in-person interactions. And 19% mentioned that there was greater accountability of students to meet their academic goals when there was in-person experiences. So this is an example of what someone wrote, again with key ideas bolded. For some students, in-person supports are necessary to get the structure and routine needed to complete coursework. On site, we are able to offer food service, weekend food, mental health supports, and community opportunities. The length of time that a student needs on site varies. Some need in-person classes for graduation pathways or to break up the online learning. Others prefer to have a quiet space to work. And then this is a second question that we also analyzed, and we're just going to highlight two responses, one from an administrator and one from a teacher. So the question was, when it comes to the overall program of Open Doors 1418 Youth Re-engagement, is there anything else that you'd like to share with us? So this was a pretty open-ended question. So the administrator responded, I think the WACs about program accountability to support the student, 2 hours, weekly contact, etc., should only be required if a student is not making IAPS. Perhaps there could be an either-or situation. Student makes IAPs monthly or weekly contact, 2 hours face-to-face, etc. Because it can be really awkward checking in with a student who is on top of everything, and often they resent needing to be tended to in a way they feel is patronizing. And truly, if a student is successful while asynchronous, making them check in with us becomes about funding for the program, and that feels gross, making students jump through that hoop for us. And then a teacher responded, removing barriers for getting an education can too easily become removing the opportunity to get an education by allowing students to go through the motions without gaining any real skills or knowledge. Compliance does not equal engagement or re-engagement. Having some digital face-to-face allowance for extreme circumstances has been vital to keeping a few students engaged. More often, it has been a crutch used to keep students on the books without any benefit to the students themselves.